Okay, so we want to draw our line on for our point shoes, okay, of where we want to be doing our darning. Now, if you go 1, 2, 3 on the pleats underneath, you can use this pleat as a guide. What you also need to make sure is that you're doing it just here on the top. I put a little dot on there, but if you want to get that dot, then put the actual shoe where it would be when you're pointing, and you put a little dot along the edge there. So then you'll have this really nice little dot just there. And then what you can do is you can take your pen and you can follow that third line up like that, okay, and then bring it around in a really nice curve. So we're just going to tilt that around that edge and then up to this line here like that, okay. And then if you then take the other side and just then, it's slightly a more of an angle. If I went that angle there, then it would be too close, so I'm going at a slightly bigger angle. It depends on your pleats and they are different depending on the shoes. Okay, so there's our nice line that we're going to use as a guideline. Okay. Okay, so you need to thread up your thread here, and you need to make sure that you've got a long amount of thread. This is about 1.5 meters, so it'd be almost 3 meters, and then you double it. Okay, so you've got this really long bit of thread here. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to start off on the toe just here. Now, some people put a knot, but that knot is going to be extremely chunky with a really thick thread, and I don't particularly like having really visible knots. So I'm going to show you a slightly different method that means that you don't actually have to use a knot. Okay. So we're going to be putting our first stitch in about here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the needle and I'm going to bring it in about here, okay, and I'm going to bring it along that line, just like that, okay. I'm going to bring it up just there, pull that through, okay, gently. It will, because it's quite a dense thread, it can sometimes tend to twist and turn, so just be gently pulling that back and make sure that you get rid of those twists. Now when you get to this stage, you've got to be really careful that you don't pull it all the way through, and it's really also important that these are exactly the same length. So if they're not, just give those a little trim with your scissors. Make sure you've got nice sharp scissors, and then we'll just pull that through just like that, and then it just disappears. You can't actually see that stitch now. Okay, so now that we've got that on, we're just going to do a little stay stitch just here, and you need to try and go into the thread that is underneath. So you've got the thread just here underneath, and you need to try and go into that thread and then come back up. So just let's go down there, come back up just about there. Okay, so you're just slightly down on that curved area. So let's just push that through just like that now. Okay, and again, it may well twist and turn, so just try and keep it straight if you can, and then we can pull that through, and that will provide a knot. Now, because I'm just using one hand, it would be good if you actually had attached this, and I may just do that so that I have two hands free in a minute. So you've got this tiny little dot just there, and we're coming up just there, and that provides a really nice knot, but also you can't see any of the end threads, so it's really, really neat for when you're carrying on with your stitching, and I am a little bit of a neat freak. So I've gone in super closer now. Okay, so what you're going to do is on the very opposite side at exactly the same point. So if you look at it and you take that same point, all you need to do is take your needle in and pull it back out again. So I'm just going to change the angle here, but you can see that this area here, you've got that tiny little knot and it just goes to there, because once we've gone over to this side, then we're going to be making sure that this is where we start to stitch, and we come back to this point every time. So I'm going to zoom in on this area here. Now, if this stitch is a little bit too far away, this one's reasonably at a good distance, then what you can do is you can just do a little stitch back again if you wanted to. So I'm just going to demonstrate that. This one's a good size, but I'm just going to demonstrate so that it's in a perfect position. Okay, so let's just pull that through. Okay, make sure that this is nice and straight, and if you get a little bit of an edge where one is slightly longer like this, you can just pull it back and then you'll get this little opening here, and then you can make sure that when you're pulling it through, it is the perfect size. So we're going to be doing buttonhole stitch, and we're going to lift this up just here. We're going to take our needle and we're going to take it on this side of this line, and then on this side of this line, and that's our first guide. Okay, so we're just going to come up, just go down just there, okay, and then come up just there on the other side, and it's about 2 millimeters, those stitches. Okay, so this is going to come around here in a loop. Okay, so we've gone underneath this thread and we're coming around there in a loop, and then we're going to pull that through. Okay, now I'm using a barrel clamp so that I've got both of my hands free, and then I can, you know, make sure that I keep the tension here, or, you know, it's much easier if you've got two hands free. So I'm going to hold this thread just down with my thumb whilst I pull this through, and then it's less likely to knot up. Okay, like that. Now, if again, like it is here, one of these strands is slightly longer than the other strand, you can just pull that back like that so that they even. Obviously you'll get this little loop just here, but just take that back like that, and then when you're actually pulling that through again, it will all be nice and neat. And to make sure that you get this really nice and tight, you can just pull back this way and then pull back that way. Okay, so to do the next stitch just there, make sure they're about 2 millimeters apart and about 2 millimeters of depth there. So a little bit longer with that stitch, just like that. Okay, and again, we're just going to pull that through. Okay, and then that's going to loop around there like that. So if you hold that down just there like that, pull that up, then it won't knot and twist. It'll just make it much easier for pulling back out. Even with two hands, it's not the easiest of things to be doing, okay, if it's a twisty thread like this one. Okay, so that's about even with those threads. So again, I'm going to pull it there and then just pull it back there like that, and you've got this really nice row of buttonhole stitch, okay, or blanket stitch. It's a little bit farther apart than your buttonhole, and it's a little bit closer together than your blanket stitch. Okay, so we're just going to carry on in that same way. Okay, so I've just moved it a little bit further over so that you'll be able to see me do the whole of this line. So I'm just going to carry on and do about 2 millimeters apart with each of those stitches. Now, if this flops on the other side of your needle, just make sure that before you take your needle through, or you could do it afterwards, that you actually make sure that this is on top here instead of on that side. And what you could do instead of a clamp or something like that is you could actually hold it between your knees, and that will act as a clamp and it keeps your hands free as well. Okay, so we're just going to come through there like that, keep hold of this thread, and then nicely pull that through, just like that. Okay, so I'm going to do another couple just so that you can see, and then I'm going to be speeding that up to the end. So I'll do another one there like that, pull that through. Okay, keep that thread taut because then you won't get the knots the same. Okay, and also if you keep it taut like this all the time, then you shouldn't get that difference in the size there either. So we've got this nice neat row of blanket or buttonhole stitch going on there. Okay, so when you get to this bit, you just need to give it a little bit of a wiggle, that needle, to pull it through, and then hold that like that so that it doesn't knot up. And then again, I'm pulling it this way and then I'm pulling it that way, and it keeps a really, really nice tight line there. Okay, so if you do it really nice and neatly on this side, enough this way, you won't actually see that line that we've drawn on there anyway. So that's, you know, really quite important as well, because we don't want to be seeing that line if we can help it. So there we go, just grab that like that, and then we pull it back. So we're just going to carry on all the way to here with that same stitch. Okay, so we've got to the end of our area there, and once you've got to the end and you've put that last buttonhole stitch, and just try to make sure that these are all in a nice neat row, because it'll just look a lot better. Okay, then what you need to do is you need to bring your needle down and start that next row. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to create our second line. So we're going to be using that guideline just there on the edge, and we're going to be coming into it and making sure that, because we want our next line to be about here. Okay, so I'm going to come into it about here, and then just on the other side of that line, just like that, so that we've got a little stitch there. Again, you know, keep this taut so that it doesn't go very knotty, and if it does go knotty, all you need to do is just pull it back a little bit and then pull it back down again. Okay, just like that. But make sure that your threads are even, so if they're not even, then just individually pull them to make sure that this is a nice line. And then we're going to go over to the other side, so we're going to come over here. Okay, and just the same sort of place, so you could use your needle as a bit of a guide if you want to, and then you're going to just do a small stitch on this side, just like we did just here. Okay, and you're just catching in that material like that. Okay, so we're going to pull that through, and again, just make sure that you keep hold of this taut so that you don't get those knots. And then we've got that nice little line again. So make sure that you can push it up so it creates that curve and it's not too taut, because obviously, as we were mentioning, if it's too taut and it won't push into that area, then that's no good either. So just make sure that you've got a little bit of leeway in order for you to do that. And then all you need to do is start your next lot of stitching again. Okay, so we're going to come under there, come under that row there, like that. Okay, make sure that we pull that through, but this is going to come round, don't forget that loop. Okay, and then I'm just going to again hold this tight here whilst I pull that through, or you can hold it just there whilst we pull it through there. Just like that. Okay, and then you're just going to do your next stitch. So if it's closer to there, then you can start doing the next little bit, which I'll show you in a minute, but mine's a little bit further away, so I'm going to do one more of those blanket buttonhole stitches before I start to catch that next little bit in. Okay, so I'm just going to come up just there, do a slightly smaller one, catch that in just there like that. Okay, pull that through, give that a little bit of a wiggle, and then just hold that until it goes right down in that loop. And there it's just formed that little bit of a knot, so again just hold that and ease it into place like that. Okay, so once you've done that little bit, you then need to start catching in these ones, and that will denote that the spaces are all exactly the same as that previous row. Okay, so let me show you how to do that. So each of these previous stitches now act as a guide for your next stitch. So you're going to come through each of these previous loops. So obviously we're starting off on this one and we're going to go into there and up through there. Now you may find it easier to use a curved needle. I'll show you one of the curved needles. So you've got different sizes of curved needles. These are quite thick. You could get smaller, thinner needles if you wanted to. You've just got to make sure that it passes through the eye and it goes through the fabric easily, that's all. You may find it easier to use a curved needle. I don't particularly like curved needles. I struggle with them a little bit, so I prefer to use a straight one all the time. So we're just going to push that through now. Okay, and again we're going to hold that thread and pull that through, and then hopefully it won't knot up before it gets to the end. And then again, when we get to this stage, I always give it a little tug that way and a little tug that way. So now we're going to go through this one and we catch that material in. Okay, pull that through like that, hold that straight and create that next loop. And again, these are our guides, so into the material and up. Okay, and then pull that through, give it a little wiggle if you need to, and then keep your thread taut, give it a little bit of a straighten there. It's really quite important that you do give it that little pull there, keep that tension and keep it really nice and tight, because that will provide a much better darn across. If it's really, really loose, then it will just come undone much, much quicker over time. So again, just here, if I come through there, I'm actually coming on one side and then the other of this thread. So obviously you don't want to do that. So make sure that your thread is always on that side as your needle comes up. And then you're just going to carry on to the end here. Okay, and then I'll discuss this end again and we'll just carry on in the same way. So you're just going to take that through there like that, give it a little bit of a wiggle, keep this thread taut so it doesn't knot up, and then give it a little bit of a tension pull. Tension tug, that's what we'll call it. Okay, oops, see, again, it's just come through there, so just make sure it's on that side of your needle. I like to make little errors like that, because then it shows you what your errors are going to be as well. Not everybody makes the same errors, but if I can see a problem, I like to be able to inform you, so that you, if you make that mistake, then you can correct it as well. So we're just going to come under there, make sure this is up here like that, and push that through like that. Give it a little bit of a wiggle. If you find it much easier, you might want to use some pliers on this needle, but it will strip the chrome, so just be careful of that. Okay, there we go, and we're just going to carry on to the end there. Okay, so I've just repositioned a little bit to make it much easier for you to be able to see what I'm doing here. So we've got the previous line with this little line here, and we've got our line just there. So we've gone to the end of our stitches now. That was the last buttonhole stitch that we did, and then we did our little stitch to start the next row. What we're going to do is we're going to stitch into that row as if it was the last buttonhole. Okay, and then obviously we need to come under that one as well, so we're keeping those lines the same. Let me just wiggle that through, pull that up like that. Okay, keeping that tension all the time so it doesn't knot, and then pulling that so it looks like it's a perfect row of the next one just there. Okay, and then I'm going to put one more that'll just be here to make sure that that finishes that edge off nicely, but we've not got a thread that we're going under here, but we're still going to do that to make sure it looks nice and neat. Just okay, so just going to keep that taut there, keep it taut, and then pull this straight if you need to make sure that those are all in line. And there we go. So there's our final one there to start our, because if you finished off there, then when you do that next one you wouldn't have that one to use. So again, we need to make sure that we come down just here on this side of our line. Okay, so we're just going to do a little stitch just about there. Okay, so that we can start our next line, just a little one coming through just there like that, and give that a little bit of a wiggle. Keep that taut, pull that through just like that. Okay, and then we're going to take that over to the other side, and we're just going to again do a little stitch, and just try and make sure that these are all the right side, you know, that the sides are approximately the same. So you might want to just look at it at this angle, because I'm looking at it from this angle at the moment, which is much harder. Just trying to make sure that we come up on the best angle to make sure that you can actually see exactly what I'm doing. So I'm just going to come into here with a little stitch. Let me just put that in. Make sure that we come the other side of that black line, just like that. Okay, and then push it through, wiggle it in there like that. Make sure that this isn't twisting and turning, which it does have a want to do, and then we can start that next line. So we're just going to come up just here, and we're going to go underneath that row, just like that, a little bit deeper in, just about there. Okay, make sure that this comes around, and when we get to the end, I will, as in the end of the thread, I will show you what you need to do with that thread to start and to finish the thread that we've got and to start a new thread. Okay, so let's just pull that nice and tight, and then we can start to go into this one, whereas on the last row we actually needed to do 2 little buttonhole stitches. On this row we can start straight into that one, and make sure that you're going into there, in through that loop, and then into the fabric, and make sure that it's coming underneath that thread there. Okay, so again, let's make sure that's looping round, give it a good little wiggle to get through, and then we can keep this taut and pull that thread, and then tighten that up as we did on the last one. And so we're going to go exactly the same all the way along as we did on the second row, and we're going to be going into each one of those loops that we prepared on that last row. So we're coming to the end of our thread now, and I'm probably just going to get one more out of this thread. So I'm just going to do one more buttonhole stitch here. Make sure that that goes around there. Pull that through like that. Okay, so when you're finishing off a buttonhole, if you finish it off here, then you'll end up with this thread coming back this way, which won't look tidy. So what I always do is I always pull the thread and then I do a little stitch just over the end. And if you do a few stitches into your material, so if you just pull that one tight like that, do a little stay stitch just like that. Okay, just make sure you're pushing it all the way through, and then give it a bit of a wiggle like that. Then that'll hold because you'll be putting more stitches on and you'll be pulling all these down anyway. So you can just now really tightly trim that off. So make sure you don't actually cut your satin though, and then you won't be able to see that end either. So you'll start off with your next thread now. Okay, so we're starting off our new thread, and you can either go that way or you can go that way. It'll be easier to come this way. So I'm just going to come up here like that, like that. Just do a little stay stitch there. Now that's a little bit of a shorter thread that a shorter stitch that I've just done, so just be careful with that one. It's better if you do a slightly longer stitch. So I'm just going to take that all the way through because I'm going to do a longer stitch there. I'm not really happy with the length of that one, so I'm just going to do a much longer stitch like that. Okay, and then pull that through like we started off. We're doing it exactly the same way as we did when we started off. So we're just pulling that through, and then when you get to the end there, just make sure that those are the same length, and if they're not, trim them off first and gently just pull that through so that you don't have any ends. Now just be careful that you don't give that a yank now, because if you do, clearly it's going to come out, and we're just going to put a little stitch there like that. Okay, and that's into the thread, so we'll push that through like that, give that a little wiggle, and again you need to just make sure that you're keeping hold of this so it doesn't twist and turn. And if you wanted to, you could actually use your needle as a guide to hold that, so it's holding it straight all the time. Just make sure that you've got it perfectly straight. See, so I've just yanked that too much and it's popped out this time, so I'm just going to do that again. So just be careful, because I clearly didn't go through the thread, because if I'd have gone through the thread then it wouldn't have done that. So pull that thread through all the way to the end. Make sure your ends are even. You might want to pull that back a little bit, and that makes them more even anyway. Okay, so that's just gone through. Take your thread again. Okay, try and make sure that you go into that thread, and that will then secure it. It's just popped out again. Let's do a much longer stitch this time. Oh, the foibles of doing things live. Right, so try and do it much longer. if you can. So I'm just going to do it there, and then I'm just going to do another little stitch just there, and that makes it quite long then. And what you can do if you wanted to is you could actually hold this thread just there like that for the time being to make sure that it doesn't pop out if you are struggling. Then do your little stay stitch, okay, like that. And then you can start off with your next row. So you're going to come up there and then through there like that. And then once you've done that and you've got to that stage, then you can trim off that thread. As I said, if you want to use your needle as a guide to guide that thread down, then you can get it right down to the bottom without, and you've got a little knot there, but it's not really in your face, and you've not got all these threads that are sticking up. And then you can take those threads and you can just trim them close to the fabric, and then you can't see those ends, just like that, and then you can carry on. So you're going to bring that over to this side now, and then you're going to do your stitching just there. Okay, so I've just flipped it the other way because now that I'm working further down, it's easier for me to see what I'm doing this way. And if you wanted to, you could always put little guide lines on like that so that you can see where you want to actually be doing your next row. You can't see that very well. I'll just put it on a little bit darker there like that, and I'm just drawing this on in pencil, and it'll make sure that when you're doing that row that those lines are nice and regimented. So we're going to bring that thread over to this side now like that, okay, and we're going to start doing that next bit of stitching. So let's just bring that in like that, and over that line like that. Make sure that's in the right place. Make sure this thread's nice and straight, just like that. Okay, so we can start doing that next row, and if these lines, you can see those lines are nice and neat from this angle, and you can just then push that up a little bit to make sure that they're always in the right place, and then you can just carry on with that stitching. Okay, so this area is filling up, and if we carry on like this, it's not going to be straight across here. So what we need to start doing is putting some extra little rows here to fill in this area so that it starts to even it up. So how we do that is we leave this little bit just here, okay, and we add in an extra row just here. So just going to bring in a little stitch just here like that, and bring in this extra row that's going to go across like that. Okay, so this one's going to go just from about there and bring in just there like that. So you've got this extra little line just going on here, and then we just carry on in the same way as we started. So we're just going to put in a little stitch just here, and then we're just going to buttonhole along there and carry on that line, so it brings in this extra little line that we need to start evening up our area, just like that. Okay, so once you get to the end of there, you can carry on down to there, and then you'll bring in that next row, and then you'll bring in another row like this every time now, just to even this up. So the other thing that you do need to do is occasionally you'll have to reduce the amount of stitches. So let me show you how to do that. So if you do a really, we'll do it centrally, or you can do it over to one side. So if we do it over this side this time, and then you can do it over that side next time, you do your stitch really, really close to this edge of that buttonhole on this one, and then you ignore this one and you do a stitch really, really close to this side of this buttonhole. And then when you come through there like that, you've lost that buttonhole, but it just makes a nice continuous neat row. So you've not done that buttonhole, you've only done that one and that one, but because you've come this side of that one and that side of that one, it makes it almost the same spacing. And then you just carry on in that same way that you've just been doing, like that. And if you wanted to, because these are very close together as well, you could just carry on with that stitching. So let's just do another couple here. Okay, and then we'll have lost one on either side on this row, and then it'll be okay on the next one because it'll be nice and spaced, which is what you do, you know, you do need. If it goes too close together and you've got too small of a stitches, then it means it will just take forever. So some people use a slightly bigger thread, and if you use that slightly bigger thread, then obviously you can go and do bigger stitches. So again, I'm going to go this side of this buttonhole. Okay, I'm going to miss that one out, and I'm going to go this side of this buttonhole like that, and then that's bringing it down just there. And again, you've got this nice continual row and you've missed this one out, and you can just carry on. So you're going to do this stitch here just like that, okay, over that little area there, pull that through. It's a little bit sticky on that one, just make sure you pull that through nicely like that. And then you're going to continue on this one, and you're going to bring that stitch in but to about there, and then it looks like it's just one continual row then, and you can't see that you've added this extra row in, and you just finish off just down here, and then we can finish off that thread as well at some point, because obviously I've now got to the end of that thread as well. And there we go, we've got our nice neat darning on the end of our point shoe there, all the way around to the bottom, and there we go, really nice and neat darning there.